Have you ever really stopped to think about the words you use every day? I mean, not just what they mean on the surface, but how they might be secretly, quietly shaping your entire reality? Today, we're going to dive into that incredible, mind-bending connection between the language you speak and the world you actually see.
So, here's the big question, right? Does the language you speak just describe the world you live in, or does it actually help build the very walls and furniture of it?
Okay, let's get real for a second. Think about something as simple and fundamental as the color blue. It just is, right? But what if I told you that your ability to even perceive different shades of blue might actually depend on the word your language gives you?
Get this. In English, we basically have one word, blue. Yeah, sure, we can say light blue or dark blue, but that's an extra step. It's optional. But in Russian, it is not optional. They have two completely separate, mandatory words, goluboy for light blue and sini for dark blue. And here's the kicker. A study found that because of this, Russian speakers are actually faster at telling these two shades apart. Their language literally gives them a perceptual advantage.
And it gets wilder. It's not just about color, it's about your place in the world. I want you to imagine for a second not having the words left or right. Speakers of the language Google in Australia use cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, for everything. They wouldn't say the ant is on your left leg, they'd say there's an ant on your north leg. Think about that. It forces them to be in a constant state of perfect spatial awareness that, let's be honest, most of us just don't have anymore.
So how on earth do these massive differences in how we see the world come about? Well, to figure that out, we've got to zoom in and look at the tiny fundamental building blocks of meaning itself.
A huge piece of the puzzle comes from the brilliant linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. He said, look, a word isn't just a sticky label you slap onto a thing in the world. It's what he called a sign. And that sign has two parts that you can never pull apart. There's the signifier, that's the sound of the word or the letters on the page, and the signified, that's the concept, the idea that pops into your head.
So, let's make that super simple. The letters T-R-E-E, that's the signifier. But the mental picture that instantly comes to your mind, the trunk, the branches, the green leaves, that is the signified. One is the form, the other is the concept.
And Saussure's analogy here is just perfect. You absolutely cannot have one without the other. He said trying to separate the signifier from the signifier would be like trying to cut only one side of a piece of paper. It's impossible. They are fundamentally completely bound together.
So if a word isn't a label, where does its meaning come from? Now this is where it gets really cool and kind of backwards. A word doesn't have meaning just floating in a vacuum. It gets its meaning from all the other words it isn't. Think about it. We know what stagger means precisely because it isn't walk, it isn't march, and it definitely isn't run. Every word carves out its own little piece of territory by pushing up against all the other words around it.
Okay, so we've got these building blocks, these signs, that all exist in this massive interconnected system. Now let's zoom back out and see how that entire system can build a framework for our reality. And that brings us to the famous Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Now, this idea really comes in two flavors. There's the strong version, called linguistic determinism, and it's pretty extreme. It basically says your language is a prison house that literally limits what you're even capable of thinking. Then there's the weaker and much more widely accepted version, linguistic relativism. This one's more subtle. It says your language doesn't trap you, but it does create these grooves or habitual ways of thinking that strongly influence how you see the world.
Benjamin Whorf himself, who, fun fact, was also a fire inspector, gave this amazing real-world example. He noticed that at chemical plants, workers were always super careful around drums labeled gasoline, but they got really careless and would even toss cigarette butts near drums labeled empty gasoline.
But here's the thing. Those empty drums were actually more dangerous because of the explosive gasoline vapor still inside. The single word empty triggered a habitual way of thinking. It signaled safe, harmless, nothing to worry about, which led to incredibly risky behavior. That right there is linguistic relativism in action.
So if language creates these habits of thought, well, it's not a huge leap to see how those habits can be deliberately shaped and used, especially by people in power, to influence our social and political worlds.
And this is where we get to the concept of ideology. Now I know, that word can sound pretty heavy, but in linguistics it just means the system of assumptions and beliefs that a group of people share. And when an ideology becomes really dominant, its ideas stop feeling like opinions. They start to feel like common sense. Just the obvious, natural way things are.
Just think about this subtle shift in our own society. We used to primarily be called citizens or patients, words that imply we're part of a society with rights and a need for care. But more and more, we're being called customers or clients. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but it's a huge ideological shift. It reframes our entire relationship with government and public services, from one of social rights to a simple business transaction.
And here is a fantastic, almost sneaky example from the world of finance. Back during the 2008 financial crisis, a huge problem was something everyone called toxic assets. I mean, the name itself just sounds dangerous, poisonous, right? But then, behind the scenes, a subtle and brilliant name change happened.
Let's just break this down. The word toxic screams danger, poison, blame. It's alarming. But legacy? What does that make you think of? History, tradition, maybe even an inheritance. It's stable, established. The effect is to instantly make the problem sound reassuring, manageable, and crucially, to deflect the blame onto something that just happened in the past. It is an absolute masterclass in persuasion through language.
Okay, so we've seen these big picture examples, but the crazy thing is that these kinds of choices, these ideological nudges, are happening all the time, right down to the very bones of how we build a simple sentence.
Every single time you form a sentence, you're making two fundamental kinds of choices. First, there's the paradigmatic choice. Think of this as a vertical drop-down menu for every word. Are you going to say the person ate the sandwich, devoured it, or scoffed it down? Then there's the syntagmatic choice. That's the horizontal choice of how you arrange those words into a grammatical order.
Let's see exactly how these choices can change everything. Look at this first headline. It's active. We have an actor, the scientist, who does an action, they deny something. It's straightforward. But now, look at this second headline, which uses the passive voice. Suddenly, the scientist is the goal, the one being acted upon. And do you notice that big empty box?
The actor is gone. Poof. Vanished. We're told the scientist was misquoted, but the grammar itself cleverly conceals who did the misquoting. This isn't an accident. It's a powerful grammatical tool called agent deletion. And once you know what it is, I promise you will start seeing it everywhere as a way to hide responsibility.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, once you learn to spot these hidden structures, agent deletion, the choice between toxic and legacy, the move from citizen to customer, you just can't unsee them. You start to recognize the angle of telling, the perspective that's being pushed, in absolutely everything you read and hear. It makes you a much, much sharper consumer of information.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. The news you read, the ads you see, the politicians you listen to, every single one of them is constantly making these linguistic choices. They are all building a version of reality, brick by brick, word by word. The real question is, what reality are they building for you?